Hey everybody, it's Sophie and Marco, Dish on the Movies. How's it going today? Well, we have to do, according to Marco anyway, a spoiler review of the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. And I'll let Marco do most of the talking because I just have one thing to say about it because it's just such a simple movie that I don't know if I want to spoil too much of it, but we'll see what happens. I guess I will say that we did the other review of it, so we've already talked about what happens in the movie. There's this main girl named Stella with her friends, and guy comes to town, and he's they end up all being friends together against this bully who's after them, and then there's this ghost, this girl ghost, who gets reawakened because they go into her old house, and I guess when they find the book of scary stories that she wrote, which is rumored to every time kids would go visit that house, she'd tell a story and the kids would disappear. It's a rumor, and everybody thinks it's made up or it's like a
What's the thing you wanted to say?
The thing I wanted to say was that
you said we've already been through it, and then you started.
Well, I just wanted to remind people. I wanted to remind people of what some of a little bit of it was about. Um, since I did say that these kids united against a bully, and he was really bad. He carried around a baseball bat, and he really could have hurt somebody badly. And I thought that what happens, I said that the ghost gets reawakened. And I thought, well, it's going to go after all the bad kids because it wasn't just one bully. He had a whole bunch of kids with him, and they were all doing bad things together. And I thought, oh, it'll go after just the bad people, and they'll all go away, and everybody will live happily ever after. And that's not so. It will go after anybody because it's full of rage at what happened to her during her childhood and whole life. And so some of the good kids who are in the movie with Stella, who's really the main character, they get killed too. So that's what I have to say about it. It wasn't what I expected. Actually, I didn't know what to expect, but this part where I thought it was just going to be bad people who got killed, that's not true. Anybody who got in its way would get killed. Okay, Marco, go.
All right,
take it away.
I'm going to talk about the full movie in general right now. But first, number one, this movie, now I was glad it wasn't just a stupid anthology movie where all the stories are separate. They're all isolated. It's all about one person. They do something bad, they get paid for it. That's what most anthology movies are. You have these very simple stories, and it's very isolated, and you're not really connected that much to it. And every single time in these anthology stories, I'm not kidding you, every single time in an anthology movie, the main character gets killed. And so this movie really solves that problem, which I couldn't figure out how you would solve that, because in every single anthology movie, it always ends up the same, where it ends with the main character getting killed. And this one, it makes it so there's like a story around it, and to where, yes, all these characters are getting killed, but they are a part of a bigger story altogether at the same time, and so it's not really the same. And so that really fixes that anthology problem. Did you ever think about that, Sophie?
Well, just to tell everybody, the scary stories, it isn't just one book, it's three. We actually happen to have it. And they actually
we have all three at once.
We have all three. It was put into one big book
called The Scary Story Treasury.
Yeah,
But
so that's what he means, that they are all several little stories that made up a 3 book series, and that's what it could have been. And I'm glad it wasn't, because that's what I had forgotten, that we even had it, and just forgotten about it. I remember hearing about it. It's just been a long time since I looked at the book.
you haven't seen a lot of anthology movies, or what?
I don't think so.
Well, in every single one, the main character gets killed off, and in this one, instead of doing that, they do it in a really smart way to where it's not the main character. It's like all the characters are connected, and so that was genius. And so now I'd like to get into each individual story. Uh, I thought, and by the way, I said last time that all the kid actors were great. I still stand by that, but I think the worst kid. Who do you think the worst kid actor was?
Hmm. Well,
I
maybe the guy who got uh, absorbed by the body of
really
the
I
the the figure that I thought was an anime figure, but it really wasn't. They actually used the pictures. They based it on. They were just actually drawings in these books of the scary monster in each one. And they actually used those as the basis for the characters in the movie. And so the one that looks like, I thought it was an anime character, like that Spirit.
so you
movie.
thought he was the worst. I kind of
He was just fair.
I kind of thought was it Ramon? I kind of thought just so you guys know, to clarify, the Hispanic kid, I think his name is Ramon. I thought he was the worst, just because he was kind of corny. Like, I don't know, like he's like that stereotypical like quiet kid with a secret, and I thought he could have been a little bit better of a character, and the way that he acted, I don't know. He seemed like a normal kid. Like, if you really want to do a character like that, you should have made him a little bit more believable, like a little bit more abrasive, a little bit more tempered or something. Because I mean, he's a draft dodger. He's running away.
It's the Vietnam War, so
Yeah, I know.
that's what he's running away from.
I don't blame him.
And his brother was killed.
But the thing is that he just kind of acted like a normal kid, and he acted like, in my opinion, he acted like as normal as Ferris Bueller.
Hmm.
Like he really didn't act like a kid who ran away from whatever state, and so I really think that it would have been good to work on his character. And everyone else did really good. And again, we have another great female character or two. You like Stella a lot, right, Safi? She was a great female character. But now let's get into the individual stories. The first one, Harold. This one was okay. The reason why I like it a lot more than I would have was because they did something very creative. It's PG-13, which it should not have been PG-13. But the thing is that Harold stabs the bully with the pitchfork, and instead of blood coming out of him, straw starts coming out of him. All of his body places, all the straw just starts coming out of his body like a scarecrow, and he basically just falls and dies because straw like goes through his entire body. And I thought that was such a cool and creative way to not have it be blood. Like, really cool.
Yeah, it was, and it was still scary.
And it was surprising too, the fact that, like,
Yeah.
I thought, oh, they're just gonna do this stupid jump scare, which, by the way, horrible jump scare, not good, and F jump scares. They do a stupid jump scare, and then he stabs him with the pitchfork, and then there's no blood, and I got really pissed for a second, but then straw starts coming out, Very good. So now let's move on to the worst segment, the Hallmark movie segment, The Big Toe. I completely rewrote this segment because, first off, it starts off a lot different in the book. Now, I don't think necessarily that they could have done that in this movie because it starts off in the book where the kid digs up a toe and he actually pulls it off of the corpse
And he's a little
unknowingly.
kid, too.
Yeah, he's like a
book.
little tiny kid.
Like maybe a toddler or 4 or 5
I guess
year old.
he thinks it's like an animal toe or something very strange. And then he gives it to his mom, and she says, "Oh, that would be really good for the soup." And then she puts it in stew. In the movie, he just gets this random stew out of the refrigerator. Now, I'm going to work with this and make it better. The character that I was given was like one of those health nut characters. He's a really organic kid. That was his character. And so right off the bat, a health nut like that would not eat something out of the fridge that he did not know where it came from. He would not just pick something out of the refrigerator and eat that.
And he talked to his parents on the phone. They were out of town, and they didn't even know what that was in the refrigerator.
And now here's the thing, and another thing. He would not eat stew. Safi knows someone who would never eat a cold soup like that, like you know who I'm talking about, because he would,
unless it was gazpacho.
Yeah, he would make us put it on the stove and like heat it up to oblivion at first before he'd even touch it because, quote, it could have germs in it. We need to cook the germs out.
Yeah, right.
And so this kid, being such a food nut, such a health nut, there's no way that he would eat cold stew.
Yeah.
And so that's number 2. And so, but
he's a teenager and he's hungry, so it's almost like they're trying to play on that, but it doesn't work.
Well, it doesn't work because they've already established the kid as a health nut, organic freak kid. I mean organic freak in the good way, by the way, not bad way. But they've already turn off your phone, Safi. They've already established this character, and so they can't just make him into an ordinary teenager who's just going to eat something out of the refrigerator. Sorry, that doesn't work. And so what they should have done, in my opinion, was first he gets it out. He says, "What is this? Where did it come from?" And his dad says, "I don't know where it came from." But then he hangs up the phone, and he gets another call, and it's his dad again. But this time it's the ghost calling him, and the ghost is disguising her voice as the dad. And the dad says, "Oh, I know where that stew came from. Your mom made you that stew, especially for you, so that you could have it while we were away." And then he's like, "Oh, okay." And then he heats it up in a bowl like a normal person, and then he eats it, and it does the same old thing, which, by the way, I have no problems with him eating it and then throwing it all over the floor. That was really good because you hear the crunching noise. That was perfect. Another fantastic example of making use of what you have without doing R-rated. Of course, once again, it should have been R-rated. Just saying. And then he should have just went to bed and ignored those kids, what his friends said on the walkie-talkie. And so what he does is he goes to bed, but then we start, and then the screen goes to black. And then we hear this crunching noise again, but this time it's a little different. And we can hear a little bit more crunching, like a different sound or two. And then we wake up and we see him, he woke up, and he can feel a weird tingle at his feet. And he looks down at his feet, and he sees the corpse woman chewing on his toe. And instead of blood, to make use of the PG-13 rating, she is drooling all over his toe, and there's drool just spit going down his foot as she's chewing and chomping on his toe, and you can have the sound get louder and louder, and then she gets off of the toe and says, "Where's my toe?" And then it turns out that she's underneath the bed, and then she grabs him, and he screams, and she pulls him underneath the bed and pulls him into the wall. And then, to top that off, we hear even more chewing, and we hear screaming at the top of his lungs because she's eating his entire body to find the missing toe. What'd you think of that version, Sophie? A lot better than what they did, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot scarier.
That's what they should have done. And without a stupid jump scare, by the way, without a stupid, lazy jump scare.
That isn't what happened, by the way, if you're confused. That's Marco's version. What happened?
That's the good version.
What happened with what he said is very mild and a lot shorter. It's so brief, it lasted like 2 seconds.
All he does is he drops the soup, he runs into the bedroom, he closes the door, he gets under the bed, he looks around for about 10 minutes, and then suddenly it's inside the wall and it grabs him and pulls him into the wall.
And that's it.
The worst part of the whole movie. I almost got mad and walked out. Not walked out, but I had to go to the bathroom the whole movie, so I wanted to go to the bathroom. And then we have the spider sequence. I've already talked about this before a lot with Safi. There's this segment in Creep Show about this guy and cockroaches. Basically what happens is cockroaches go all over his body, and then they start coming out of his mouth, and he falls to the floor, and cockroaches start coming out of his eyeballs, they start coming out of his nose and his mouth and everywhere, and just start eating his body from the inside out. And they could have done a very smaller version of that with smaller spiders in this girl's face. They could have really done a good job doing that instead of going to CGI, computer graphics, which is what they did. And I understand it would have been harder to control the spiders, but I don't know. You could have found some good spiders to do that. And then here's my caveat. When the guy gets the bucket of water, her brother, you could then turn the real spiders into computer spiders, because in the end they do disappear. And so, but I really think at first it should have been real spiders, and I think it would have been really scary. A lot of kids have fears of spiders, not me, of course, because I'm a man.
He's bullshitting because he's so scared of spiders. I won't even go into
That's not true.
what I have. Yes, you are. I won't
That's
even
not true.
go into what I have to do.
Well, there was one morning where I woke up and there were 5 mega spiders like crawling out from all different angles, and I had to trap them all in containers because I woke up really, really early, and it was like when they all come out to like have a town meeting. And so, but I really think that they should have used real spiders, because I think that it would have been a huge throwback to Creep Show, and a huge accomplishment, because they really accomplished a lot with everything else in the movie, with all the special effects and practical effects. And then the Jangling Man, I have no issues with that. And then the Red Room one, I have no issues with that. In fact, I looked up the Red Room story, or it's called The Dream, online, and the movie actually improves on the Dream story immensely, because basically the whole point of the story is that you can't escape fate. Like, she has this dream, she escapes, she goes to a different town instead of the one that's in her nightmare that she thinks she shouldn't go to, and then she ends up meeting that monster anyway. And so, really, that's the whole point. So, you could apply that to anything, any person, any monster, any setting. But the way that they did it was just perfect. And there was no jump scare, by the way. It was just a continual suspense of him turning around in all these corridors while seeing that figure. And so then, lastly, since this is so long, lastly is the haunted house. I kind of thought this was a little bit of a letdown. They built up the family to be really sadistic and evil.
But the family of the girl.
Yeah, the family of the ghost. And they built up this family to be really evil.
They were evil.
They had this tape that they listened to where the ghost, she gets tortured and electrocuted and by her own brother.
She's in a mental institution, and they're doing the.
But nonetheless, she gets tortured.
Yeah, she's being tortured by these devices that they used to, electroshock therapy and other things, and they were doing that to her, and while they were doing it, they were doing a, I used to type them. I used to work in a mental health clinic, and I can't think of what it's called, but when you interview a client, you do, case notes. They're like case notes, only they were on a recording, and they found them in some kind of it was in
archive
the hospital
room.
Archive room,
and
they had that one of the girl. They had one or more, who knows, but they listened to one, and we got to listen to it too, and it was
but the thing
horrible.
is, and then Stella, you like Stella, right, Safi? Stella in the haunted house, she basically takes the place of the ghost, and so she's basically trying to hide from this family. She's basically been transported back in time, which I don't know how that's possible.
I don't either. That's to me, that's kind of a hole in the story.
I actually love that idea of how they're both in the house together, yet they can't connect to each other because she's in a certain time period and he's in the present.
Yeah, she's talking about Ramon.
Yeah, the worst
If
kid. The worst kid actor. And so, but then she hides under the table, and then the family discovers her. And do they torture her sadistically and just utterly destroy her like medieval style? No. They take her, they drag her, and they throw her in the basement and lock the door. That's their punishment. It's something that already happened to her earlier in the movie with all of her other friends that get locked in the basement together by that bully. Something already happened to her. And so I thought that was kind of a failure, because then the ghost wasn't really scary at all. In fact, she wasn't meant to be scary. And then the only threat in that house was that jangly man who's going after Ramon. So I really think that the family should have tortured her, or should have attempted to torture her. Maybe they could set some booby traps around to try to trap the sister from running away. Like in Nightmare on Elm Street, she's walking down the stairs and they turn into quicksand. Like something like that. What do you think, Safi? Don't you agree?
Sure. But they didn't do that, so it was a very creative story regardless.
It was okay.
And it wasn't...
It could have been better.
Like what Marco said originally, it wasn't just a bunch of the little stories that were in the books. It was, they all were part of a bigger picture.
They held back so much because it's PG-13.
Yeah.
And so that's ultimately the big issue. It's PG-13, it should not be PG-13. We went to a theater of like 30 people, and all 30 of the people were like middle-aged couples.
Well,
or older people.
They were older.
Like they were not kids. There were no kids in the movie. And so once again, like what they did with Goosebumps, they're not knowing their audience here.
Yeah, because those were written when my older son, I think, was a kid, or maybe even earlier than that. I've heard the Big Toe and other like I've said in the other tape, in a folklore tape, that where they have a reader who expertly tells these scary stories and says it in a southern type of a voice, and there's music and
The Big
sound
Toe.
effects.
The Big Toe is actually my second favorite. My favorite one is, I can't remember the official title, but it's the one where she's standing on top of the grave
Yeah,
and she actually gets pulled into the grave by like her friend or something. That's my favorite scary story to tell in the dark.
that's not in the
But,
movie. These
yeah, it's
these are
not in the
just
movie.
these are from the book.
It's from the book. But ultimately, this movie's biggest problem is being rated PG-13, as anyone would have predicted, and the fact that they use jump scares like losers.
Okay, I think we better wrap it up.
Yeah, okay, everyone.
Bye,
Goodbye!
everybody. See you soon.